Welcome to episode number 2. In this episode, we're going to tackle public land deer hunting here in the state of Illinois. It is all of our home states. So we're going to kind of tackle all the. All right.
There it is. We got it. We're still learning here and just breaking it in, breaking the ice over here.
All right. So public land deer hunting in the state of Illinois. We're going to try to get into as much detail as we can about public land deer hunting. As much as it upsets people when we talk about how to hunt, how to apply for tags. If you go on our YouTube, that's all it is people getting, let's face it, butthurt about us naming national forests we've hunted or naming how to apply for tags in certain states. This episode
you got a comment on the turkey video yesterday, like that turkey hunting video.
I did see the comment on our turkey video. I told everyone we were hunting the Pike National Forest, and they got very upset, even though the Pike National Forest, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of acres that is, but
you dropped a pin on it.
You could not, it wouldn't matter. You could have 10,000 people in the Pike National Forest, and they might not run into each other.
It's a little bit of a different ball game out that direction, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think let's just get into it. We're going to talk about public land deer hunting here in Illinois. Public land hunting, I feel like it's nothing new. People have been doing it for years, but with shows, like some of the newer shows that have come out and just some of the information that we now have at the palm of our hand, whether it's onX or the mapping systems, shows like the Hunting Public, MeatEater, I feel like have really put a spotlight on hunting public land in the United States. And usually these shows are kind of geared more towards, the West, where there's a lot more hunting opportunities, a lot more public hunting opportunities. There's a lot of states out there where it's actually harder to find private land than it is public land, because in some units it's 80% public, 20% private. We're here in the Midwest, where we reside now and are going to be talking about today. It's mostly made up of all private land. So the public land is more dispersed. It's harder to find, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't be successful when hunting these public lands. I think there's a lot of great public land resources in Illinois that maybe sometimes are overlooked. Some of them are probably overhunted. Some of them are probably underhunted. But I think we all have experience with it to some degree. So we're going to try to tackle it today, get into everything, and hopefully help somebody out who's coming to the state for the first time and is trying to find a spot to hunt. We'll go over... to be honest, I plan on getting pretty specific about some of the places that you could tackle. I don't hunt public land, so
you can get as specific as you want, right?
If you want to blow up a spot, doesn't really affect me. I know people will get upset about it, like we said before, but again, hunters helping hunters. I've never had a problem with it, but some do. So if you're someone who gets upset, if you hear your favorite public land spot get mentioned in a podcast, you should probably turn it off now.
Yeah, it's not going to be good, is it?
So first thing is, why hunt Illinois compared to some of the other Midwest states for whitetails? Hunter, I guess I'll send it over to you, comparing Illinois to some of the other neighboring states or even just some of the whitetail states. I think Illinois has a lot of advantages. I also think there's a lot of disadvantages. If you're watching this video, you might be already set on Illinois, or you might be, shopping around.
I can't speak for the non-resident as far as how hard it is to draw a tag, but everything I've seen is I think you can pretty much get a tag here almost every year. Is that not right?
So I'm currently a non-resident of the state of Illinois, and have put in for tags the last 2 years. When it comes to archery, if you're a bow hunter, archery tags are statewide. So you can get one tag and you can hunt any spot in Illinois, essentially. There are some limitations. There are some like special draw areas and stuff like that. But for the most part, an archery tag in Illinois is going to let you hunt the entire state. You do have to put in for it. There's a draw every April. With the archery tags, for the most part, they do not hit their quota, meaning you can usually drive to Illinois during the season and buy an archery tag. Firearm tags are a little different. Firearm tags are going to be county wide. So you're going to have to pick a county you want to hunt in. For public land hunting, some of these spots have certain restrictions for firearms, others do not. But firearm tags are much harder to get in the state of Illinois, and you have to already know where you want to hunt. And when it comes to public land, that might limit you to one spot in one county. But those tags do hit their quota in certain counties. So if you're looking at, depending on where you're looking, if you're looking at like the Golden Triangle area, if you're looking in Pike and Brown counties, those are going to run out way before some other counties that, don't hit their quota as fast.
Is that the Golden Triangle area?
Pike County? Think that's what they call it.
I've never heard of that, actually. I guess we're outside of the triangle down here in the southern half of the state, but I guess you're pushing in close to those areas, aren't you?
I'm right on it.
He's in Missouri. Yeah. Yeah. So Jordan explains to me that he lives just north of St. Louis. So I think he's now a Missouri resident, but all along he's actually just north of East St. Louis. Would that be fair to say? Or are you still north of
I'm north of St. Louis proper. The river makes
Illinois side.
River makes a left turn up there, and I'm right above it.
So have you looked up there as far as any public land? Or are you staying on private for now? Are you gonna scout anything public up there?
So I've hunted a little bit of deer on public. For the most part, my public land experience has come from duck hunting. I've hunted a lot of different duck holes in Illinois and Missouri and a lot of other states. A lot of those properties you can deer hunt on, and a lot of those properties we see a lot of deer when we're out there duck hunting. Up my way where I'm deer hunting, I hunt private. We're fortunate enough to have ground. But there is public directly adjacent to it. And on that public land, the deer that, we are hunting travel back and forth to it. You guys still there?
Oh yeah, we're there. We made you full screen now because I thought you were going to get on a ramble there, but
no. So I do have quite a bit of experience either hunting ducks on public or hunting deer on private that is adjacent to public. Turkey's the same. I have hunted quite a bit of public land. It's just not a lot of deer hunting on public land because I'm fortunate enough to have private land to hunt.
So you're not going to look to expand outside of that unless it's something like a lease, or in the future you're going to be looking to purchase land, anything up there?
I don't think so. We kind of have the land set right now, so we're marrying into enough acreage that we don't need to look outward.
That's a smart move.
Yeah.
Can't say. Well, I don't know. I haven't done that yet, but.
So back to why, hunting Illinois, I think when you compare it to some of the other states, when it comes to public land opportunities for whitetail, I think Iowa and Kansas are kind of the two heavy hitters in that regard.
I think Ohio's kind of pushing up there now too. I think their tags are a bit cheaper too, aren't they? And with them in Wisconsin, I feel like they're kind of making a run for it as well. But
yeah, I think the public land opportunity in Kansas, there's a lot of public land that you can hunt in Kansas. There's a lot of walk-in areas, a lot of private parts that have open access to hunters. And you see, like, you see a lot of big deer getting killed on public in those states. The problem with Iowa and Kansas is it's, for the most part, pretty hard to get tags.
So
Kansas is a point system.
Yeah, Iowa
so
is
you got to
too.
wait for points, and I believe Iowa is too. So those states, you might have more public land to hunt, but you're not going to get to hunt it as often because you're not able to get a tag every year. Where in Illinois, you can get an archery tag every single year, and you can hunt it every year. So you can kind of take your time finding a spot. Just even private land hunters, when it comes to, if you're after a mature buck, even private land hunters aren't shooting a mature buck every year. It takes, sometimes it takes a couple of years to even learn a private land property. So if you're someone who wants to learn a property and kind of learn a spot, Illinois kind of affords you the opportunity to learn those spots.
Yeah, and I don't think like price comparison on all these Midwest states. I don't think it's really that big of a difference all throughout, except for like Iowa, whenever you have to buy preference points and send in year to year, and you don't get that tag every year. I think I saw where you might have to have 3 or 4 preference points to get an archery tag, and I think their gun tag was like every other year. But I
Yeah.
don't know that price would ever factor in for the out of stater, because already they're spending. You know how much it costs to travel out of state and hunt.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't
in
know.
Illinois, I mean, my Illinois tag this year, if you want to go bow, if you want to get an archery tag, it's over $400, and that's just for the deer tag. And then a firearm tag is also going to put you out close to $400. So if you want to hunt both archery and firearm, you're talking, $800 plus a hunting license. So yeah, if you're hunting out of state, you should plan on spending money. And it really doesn't matter what state you go to. If you're out
Yeah,
west or if you're in the Midwest, most of these states, they're going to get their money's worth out of you when it comes to buying
it's
tags.
still cheaper than elk hunting, but
The Clusterbuck Podcast is brought to you by Sasquatch Tea Company. Sasquatch Tea is America's tea built by Americans for Americans. All Sasquatch Tea's flavors are named after our national parks to represent America and all its natural wonders. Be sure to use the promo code RC10 at checkout on your next purchase to receive 10% off.
I mean, we're talking public land hunting too, so it's a different beast. I think no matter if you're in the Midwest chasing whitetails or you're out west elk hunting, I mean, public land's public land. You're going to run into people, and you're more than likely going to have to search a little harder to find those deer, those elk. Now, I'll say that you can find a whitetail a lot easier than some elk, but you're running into more hunters as far as my experience goes. There's not
Yeah.
a foot of for instance, we go elk hunting and we pass what 3-4 guys on our way in for that week,
Yeah.
and then we run into, I don't know, 2 guys, one group of guys on like the Thursday of the hunt. So we go a full week and see 4 people, whereas on some public pieces around here, you're going to run into 4 guys in one day, or you're going to see 10 trucks at the parking lot when you get there. So it's that part alone can be intimidating. And I don't know, it kind of pushes me more towards leasing or permission properties and stuff like that.
So I guess that brings us to our next point, kind of like the public land versus private land. We're obviously discussing, hunting public in Illinois, but maybe for somebody who, has a lease, say in Kentucky, or has a lease, in Alabama, and then, just wants to experience hunting Illinois, kind of comparing and contrasting the difference of public versus private. I think one of the big thing is just, how much better is the private land compared to the public land?
Yeah, I think that depends on the size of piece that, you have permission to hunt on the private land, because growing up, I mean, we've got like 10 acres behind our house, and then your adjacent properties, you might have 4 or 5 parcels against you that are 10 acres or 20 acres. And it almost hunts public at times, because you've got your neighbor right beside you hunting during shotgun season. It's no question that you're going to hear 10 plus shots. So
Yeah, I
it
guess that
depends.
was kind of going to be my point, is how there's a lot of private land that feels almost more pressured than some public land can be, or at least equal to, when, like you said, if you're hunting a small parcel and it's next to a bunch of small parcels, like for the most part, everyone in Illinois grows up deer hunting. I mean, even the kids in school you went with who didn't deer hunt, when shotgun season comes in, like they're deer hunting. It is a, like, it's
It's a
just kind of a way
clusterbuck.
of life. Yeah. It's kind of a way of life here in Illinois, where, people who aren't even interested just go, because it's kind of
It's the thing to do.
just
It's the
what
hot
you do.
topic.
It's just
Yeah.
what you do. You go with your grandpa, or you go because your uncle's got a spot, and you get a tag and you go sit in the woods for a weekend. A lot of
That's right.
schools let out on Friday. So I
I
think
keep
that,
my I killed my first deer actually over here on this guy's dad's land. So my uncle, this is my cousin
Yeah.
John. So
Yeah.
I
So
think I don't know how many first deer have been killed on that property, but I feel like it's a lot. There's some good deer out there. Now, how many acres is that private piece?
A little over 100.
A little over 100.
Originally, it was 80 acres, and then you added on another 27. So,
And do you feel like it hunts big, or does it hunt small, or does it depend on? I feel like
on the year.
Yeah, it depends on the year.
Like,
Seems like you've always got a good deer, though.
Yeah.
I mean, at least one down there that is a shooter every year, whereas some properties you might not get that opportunity.
And I think it's interesting, like when you look at some of like the, like if you follow some of the deer, like studies that they do where they track these deer, they put collars on them, and you actually see how far a deer will travel on like a map. You know, you think 100 acres is a lot until you like watch on a map and you see how far a deer truly travels. So I think that comes with two things where if you're hunting public land and you think, well, there's no big deer on this public land, if there's private adjacent to it, like chances are, deer, they don't see property lines. They can feel the pressure, but if the pressure is just as high on the private land because everybody's hunting, there's just as good of a chance that deer is going to walk across an imaginary line that it can't see. So what do you think if somebody was coming to hunt public land in Illinois? Let's say they felt like they were a good whitetail deer hunter. They grew up hunting. They feel like, hey, I know what I'm doing. What should their expectations be, if they're coming to Illinois and they're coming to hunt on public land?
As far as like class of deer, like what you're going to see is
just anything. Like if you're coming, would you tell somebody, hey, like you should expect to, hold off on a certain class of deer? Would you be someone who says, hey, any deer you see, you should probably take a shot at it? Like, what would you tell somebody who says, hey, I want to come to Illinois? What is realistic expectations?
We're still talking hunting public ground, right?
We're talking hunting public ground. They want to go home with a buck. They're hunting 1 week. They took off 1 week, say it's middle of November. What should their kind of goals be? What should their expectations be? Are they going to see a lot of deer? Are they going to, have a chance at a big deer?
I think that's a time of year that anything can happen.
It's true too.
From what I've seen, a lot of the people that are traveling to hunt public land on Illinois are coming from southern states largely. They're coming from the southern states and some of the eastern states where they just don't have that many big bucks.
Yeah.
And, I used to think that they're going to be disappointed because they're going to get and hunt the public land in Illinois and expect private land deer in Illinois. And the deer you see on TV in private land in Illinois are not that common in public land.
Yeah.
But if you're coming from Alabama and Louisiana, Georgia and Florida, and Florida and Georgia have been really increasing in numbers on the public land where I've hunted recently. And the past few years, you just see more and more people from Florida and Georgia. And if you look at what they're hunting down there, it makes sense because that their biggest deer they can expect most years down there. I know they get bigger, but they're looking at being happy with 110, 120 inch deer is like really good a lot of years.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all they're expecting to get from the Illinois land, but they have a lot better chance of getting that.
Yeah.
You're a lot more common.
Your average deer walking around here is gonna be bigger than 110 inches.
But it's just not the same expectation as it is on public or on private land in Illinois.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like these sheds that are sitting here, these are public land sheds, aren't they?
And there are big deer
on sheds public land gigantic.
In Illinois.
I wish you could see him in person right here.
Kind of looks like the Clusterbuck logo.
Yeah, this is the Clusterbuck logo.
It is. That should be. If it's not, we need to redraw it.
No, that's why.
I've seen bigger deer on public land in Illinois, but they're very, very few and far between.
Yeah.
And you got to put in the work to find them. You may get lucky and luck across one, especially in the rut. It happens, but it's more likely you're going to look at 120 inch deer is probably going to be a lot better chance of getting that.
Yeah.
And usually when you see people that travel state to state and hunt, they're not waiting for 150-inch deer.
Yeah.
They're, in any state that they go to. You see a lot of the hunters that travel state to state, they're shooting 120, 130-inch deer, and they're happy with them because they got a week to hunt public land, figure it out, and get it done.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say your expectations, you have a legitimate chance of seeing 130-inch to 140-inch buck if you put in the time and you get, good sign and scouting and you feel like you're dialed into an area. I feel like you're going to have a chance maybe at a 130, 140-inch buck, but you're going to see a lot of those, 110 to 125-inch deer that will surprise you. You get a little trigger happy on them, see them coming out of nowhere, and you're going to want to bust one. But
I think Nico made a good point where, like,
depends on the time of the year too.
Yeah, like mid-November, like I think you guys are right on the money with, like, that's 120, 100 to 120-inch deer is, you have a really good chance. If you're in a semi-decent spot, if you do a little bit of homework and go in. But like Nico said, if you're in Illinois, like, there's always a chance that a buck that's the sheds that are sitting on the table there could walk by.
I mean, what do these sheds score? Do you have a score on them, or are they upper?
I think they're mid to upper 160s.
Yeah, I'd say 160s at least.
But I mean, there was one deer like that in that spot.
Yeah.
And it stayed pretty tight to the edge of that public. And so.
And you hunted it. I mean, you hunted that area a lot to know.
Oh, to even know it was there. I mean, like, it took a lot of scouting and watching and.
But did you also had did you have some guys on your camera that had came into the area that maybe weren't so familiar with the area that you were, that were hunting this deer or potentially getting a shot at him in the same token? Like, these guys could have just came in that week and got a shot at him.
Yeah. And actually, I believe that this deer was shot. Well, I heard about a hunter shooting it through the back and I never saw that deer again after that and thought it was dead until I found the sheds at the end of after the season.
That's a sweet surprise on a deer like that.
So to even build upon that, like the property, the permission property, like that I was hunting this year, my stand was sitting less than 100 yards from public land. And we knew there was public hunters on the public land bow hunting because we stopped and talked to them. And we have trail cam photos of, trophy class deer on that camera 100 yards away from the public line. And we know, from, deer studies that those deer, they're definitely on public. And last year, the hunters, they come back to the same area every year. And I think that's pretty common once out-of-staters find, maybe kind of a little honey hole where they, they're not pressured and, they, like you said, they know the area. They come back every year. And last year they killed a very nice, like, a buck that you would be happy with if you were on private land. And they come from Florida. They hunt, 2-3 weeks out of the year. But I know from my experience hunting right next to that huge chunk of public, like, I know those big deer that we have on camera are traveling freely onto public. It's just, do public land hunters know, for one, about the area? It's not well marked. If you have Onyx, you can find it. And I'm always surprised. I hunted it this year. I went and my dad was hunting. And I went with my dad just to, like, sit up in the tree with him. And I was surprised with, like, the lack of hunters, I guess, during archery season. Now, during gun season, it's a different animal, but during archery season, driving in and you're driving through this public corridor where it's just great whitetail habitat. There's no trucks on the side of the road, and it's the week before shotgun season. It's prime time. And, we get up in the tree. My dad, we have trail cam photos of big deer. We're seeing big deer from the tree, and these deer are walking to public land and there's nobody over there hunting it. So I think if you do your homework, you have a, that's someone who would have to spend a lot of time on the ground to find these areas, but those areas are out there where big deer are traveling.
I think a lot of times too, we get turned off by pressure, so to speak. Like, when you hear the terms pressure and you see 10 guys in the parking lot, you instantly are like, man, this place is blown out. But There's an advantage to that too at times. I mean, if you're in the right spot and these deer are getting bumped all day long, why not take advantage of that pressure? I mean, it keeps them moving. It's like they're out cruising, and I mean that's something you just can't get turned off by it and write the spot off.
I mean, in Illinois,
like gun season here.
You joke around about it, but like you could see 160-inch deer in the Walmart parking lot. Like there's deer that
what Walmart is that?
I mean, there's deer that you can.
That Marion, I see a lot of.
If you drive around behind the Marion Walmart, there's some big deer back there, man. You golf on that golf course, you can see some big deer. And it's like you're in the middle of town. Yeah. So like those deer, I mean, there's big deer all in Illinois, and deer travel. During the rut, they're going to move. So pressure or not, I agree with you. I think pressure turns a lot of people off, but I think we underestimate how much pressure there actually is on private land as well. We think of private land as like these deer sanctuaries, when in reality, almost every piece of private land has a hunter on it.
Yeah, I mean, we're bumping them to the public ground probably more than they're bumping them to us. I mean, depending on the time, but
I think during archery season, especially, like I'm not sure how much of a difference there truly is on some of those big parcels of archery hunters versus public land hunters, where some guys going and hunting the same area, the same tree stand, the same 20, 30, 40 acres every day, compared to a public place where, how many people are really going in there during archery seasons?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on the time of the year. You see all sorts of different crowds. It seems like midweek, there might not be anybody there, or that might be full at the right time of the year. I mean, do you drive through some public quite often?
I watch public pretty closely around where I hunt. So from what I've seen, typically most of the public I've hunted, you'll see early October. I mean, you may have a little rush of hunters like the first couple of days of archery season, but until you get to November, there's just not that much pressure most places. I mean, they're like I said, the first week of October, the first day or two, especially first weekend, you'll see an influx of pressure, but then it will drop down. And really, my favorite time to hunt the public in Illinois is October and after the first firearm season. It used to be October through the weekend before firearm season. Yeah. The pressure really didn't pick up until that weekend. The firearm hunters would start coming in. They would start walking around scouting, and sometimes they would bring a bow and hunt the week before, but usually they would just like walk around the public land and scout. Just
stirring them up almost.
But then, they hunt real hard firearm season. But after the first firearm weekend, pressure just drops off dramatically. I mean, like the second firearm season, hardly anybody would come around. And, and through the late season, it was like there was hardly anybody hunting. Now that's changed in recent years. In the past few years. And, I mean, it's not really care what you think about crossbows, whether you like them or not. But ever since they made those legal for the whole season, I've noticed a trend of people coming to hunt firearm season. Like the first year they came and they hunted that weekend and the week before firearm season leading up to it, instead of just scouting it, because they brought their crossbows with it, and people that typically didn't bow hunt. And then people started realizing, well, that worked pretty well. Let's come a week earlier.
Yeah.
And then they figured out, well, we can just come and hunt November 1st through the 15th. And really the pressure is really, really intense from November 1st through first firearm season now. And if you come before that, it's not that bad. If you come late season after the first firearm season, it's not that bad.
Yeah. And I've noticed on a lot of state ground late season, particularly not necessarily right now at the beginning of December, but once we get down to the end of season at late December, early January, they'll leave some crops in places. And that's when some of that state ground can get really good. You got those deer coming out and you got snow on the ground, freezing cold temperatures, deer just, they got to come to the food at that time of the year. And definitely a lot of these guys they're home at this point. I mean, you can kind of feel it. You feel the hype a little bit around deer season. I mean, even now, I don't know that I feel the same motivation to get out there and
You get a little burnt out after
yeah,
firearms.
essentially. So, but then I kind of pick back up at the end of season, and if I'm gonna hunt public, I'd rather hunt. For me personally, I'd rather hunt at the end of the year, just because I know of where some food's gonna be at, and there's not gonna be that pressure that we talked about before.
And that's my favorite time to hunt public land in Illinois. I mean, I don't like season coming to an end. I dread, the end of season, but I've seen, the past 10 years hunting public land here, it just gets better and better towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
And you get more sightings of bigger bucks, or more mature bucks. And, if you find, and not even just the crop food sources, a lot of the public places will leave some of the rows of the crops in, which helps. But acorns, and a lot of people aren't going and targeting the acorns on the public land late season, but you got like red oaks, and I don't know if black oaks or whatever other oaks.
Yeah.
Some of them get better later in the season. I mean, the white oaks are all gone. They're gone early by the end of October mostly.
Yeah.
Probably mid-October. But some of those red oaks will hold around, and they'll start eating them later in the season once you've had some frosts, and they get really good towards the end of season. I remember one year hunting this hillside, and a snowstorm was coming in, and I had a whole bachelor group of bucks come in and feeding through the snow had already built up like 2 or 3 inches, and the deer were digging down and eating the acorns below me on that hillside.
So if you had to pick, if we had to go down the list here, you had to pick 1 week then to hunt. You could come to Illinois for 1 week to hunt whitetails. When would it be?
God, that's a tough time. I don't know. This year, I liked the week before the first gun season. I just thought that there was a lot of cruising going on, a lot of, bucks or a lot of does starting to come in the heat. So, I mean, I had a really good week prior to gun season, but like John talked about over here a minute ago, the week between gun seasons, I mean, that's a good time to be there too. But
would you be worried? Like hunting public land, would you be worried, like he said, the week before kind of firearm season, there's a lot of people roaming the woods? Would that be something to deter you if you were coming from out of state to hunt that week?
No, honestly, I would like it. I mean, I think the more people walking around, the better to a certain extent. If you can, find a pocket that's not necessarily beat to death and still have some pressure around the edges. But yeah, I don't know that as an out-of-stater, I would necessarily try to come in late season like we were just talking about. But I do think that could be an effective strategy. I mean, heck, January 1st through the 7th, I wouldn't be afraid to try that, especially if you're going to get some weather. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find the pressure that you're going to find here early season. So if I'm an out-of-stater, I'd say, late December, early January, I'd try that.
Nico? I mean, if you're somebody who the pressure doesn't bother you, to me, I don't want to go out in the woods and have people walking under me.
No,
and I've had that a lot. Yeah. But even early season, when there's not as many people around, I've had it because usually I'm not parking where I'm hunting. I'll get dropped off, or I'll walk in, or I'll ride my bike or whatever, and people don't see a car there, so they don't know I'm there. And I don't blame them for walking under me because they think nobody's there.
Yeah.
But when you do that, just be ready for people to walk under you because.
So, not to get off subject here, but what is the proper etiquette whenever you're in that situation and you have somebody walking under you? Do you flash a light at them? Do you let them walk by? Do you say something to them, or it depends on the situation, I guess, more than anything?
I think most people, like if it's dark, somebody's walking, they'll flash a light at them. And that's the typical thing. And most people, if they see that, they'll turn around and go another way. Me, I let people go and just whatever.
Even if they set up right beside you?
Well, I've never had that.
Not yet.
Well, I've had people, like I've heard people walk in and set up like in between me and the bedding and not far from me. And I'm like, well, they're being a little loud, but
yeah.
kind of ruined that hunt. But
yeah. So Nico, when would you go?
I don't know. I think it kind of depends on what you kind of want. Like if you
let's say you're an out-of-stater, just clean slate. First time here.
I don't know.
And you're hearing this podcast.
Like your
If you don't
expectations.
want to see anybody, then come early or late season. But if you haven't done any scouting or anything, you want to catch something slipping up, maybe Thanksgiving weekend or something.
Yeah.
I think if you're not worried about the pressure, the first week of November is probably good. Your pressure's starting to pick up, but your deer movement's picking up too. And the pressure isn't as bad as it's going to be the second week of November, I don't think, or at least that,
Yeah, I would agree.
you know,
with that.
7th through the 15th. It's probably going to be your worst pressure in the archery season. Really, I would say probably a better time would be the last week of October.
Yeah.
I think you're really seeing the bucks increase their daylight movement more and more. And if you can get on a pattern pretty quick, you can kill a buck a lot easier than a targeted buck a lot easier than you can mid-November, where it's just more random. But that's not to say that that's not a good time to hunt public ground still. I have been leaving public like the second week of November the last few years a lot, just because the pressure it's gotten so intense, and I'll go hunt private just to get away from it. And then I regret it a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because, then
you don't know what happened out
well,
there.
or you do know what happened.
Yeah.
You
You want to say what
and are and then you see the deer moving and stuff still when you're looking around. So, I think it probably would have been good to keep hunting it a lot of those years. Man, I can't do the
Jordan, what about you? What week are you coming in?
I mean, like you said, there's a lot of pressure, like November 8th to the 15th, but I think the randomness of it, of anything could walk by you at that time. And those big bucks, like, they're never stupid, but if they ever were going to be stupid, it's going to be that week. Like,
they're pretty stupid sometimes.
Like they can,
and
and with that pressure, like you were saying before, sometimes it works in your favor where, hey, that big buck might be bedded down. Somebody might walk in and bump it, and that buck might leave private. That buck might get bumped from private and run to public because there's so much pressure on private that week as well, that buck might just run right under you. And then the rut as well. I mean, there's bucks that are nocturnal their whole life, except for those 2 weeks out of the year when they start chasing does.
And something else that's good about that time period, if you're coming in from out of state, you're going to want to utilize as much time as you can in the tree, and you're going to start seeing daytime activity that time of the year. You're going to have bucks up and cruising. You might get some midday.
They'll move all day. I mean,
but that would be, say, early October. They're going to be into their early morning, early evening pattern, and then midday. What are you going to do? Are you going to, do you sit that out? I guess, but
it also brings in if you're coming from out of state, how are you getting that deer home? If you're planning on, are you going to process that meat here? You're going to drive it home. Like mid-November, you got a much better chance of temps being low, being able to get that deer in a cooler and get it home. Where in, middle of October, beginning of October, you shoot a deer, especially the southern part of this state. Like, I mean, there's days where it's still 80 degrees beginning of October. You have to get to that deer really quick. You're dealing with flies and just,
yeah, I feel like we're still at those temperatures though at times here. It's like,
it's
60 degrees in the forecast right now?
It's warm.
Is it? It's going to be 60 something at the end of this week.
I think there's a chance of snow sometime this week.
It's been wild is all I have to say.
So that's when to hunt. I guess the next topic would be how to hunt. Is it something that, you utilize, if we think of, ourselves, we grew up whitetail hunting, we kind of hunting out of a tree stand, I think probably for all of us is probably like where we feel the most comfortable. But somebody coming from, a Western state who's used to spot stalking, or, someone coming from a state who, some states they can hunt with dogs. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to hunt. So I guess, like if you were telling someone who had never hunted, Illinois and maybe hunted in a different way, how would you hunt? Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for food? Are you looking for cover? Are you looking for bedding? What sign are you looking for? And then, like, how are you hunting? Are you in a tree stand? Are you on the, Do you like to utilize hunting from the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely everything you said there is a factor. The most important thing would be the time of the year. Obviously, that's going to change how you're going to hunt a little bit. Like you can get away with the ground approach probably more in November when they're down and cruising and not necessarily on all of their toes. But yeah, I mean, late October, early October, you're probably looking scrapes and things along those lines, bedding. You're wanting to be tight to cover. And I think the biggest key would be to be able to come down and scout. I mean, I don't think anything beats being able to look at the ground yourself and find fresh sign, because
what are you looking for?
I mean, scrapes generally. For me, I'm looking as many scrapes and rubs as I can find,
So like
fresh rubs.
From like the last week of October to like the midweek in November, you're looking for scrapes, you're looking for rubs.
Yeah, I think you're still gonna have deer checking scrapes.
Are you setting your stand right on the scrape? Are you trying to hunt off of it? What's your tactic like when you
I'm trying to be close to it. I'm not necessarily limiting myself to being right on top of it, but you're trying to get as close as you can to as many as you can for me, and close to bedding. But
what are you looking for? Say someone says, I don't want to come that week. I know there's a lot of pressure. I'm coming the first week of October. I'm coming opening, week. What would you look for then?
White oaks, wouldn't you? White oaks. And
yeah, if you're hunting, especially timbered areas, white oaks.
Yeah.
And check and see which oaks are producing, which ones aren't. You can go check several. And on the OnX app, I mean, they have layers where it will show where more oak trees are. Or if you just look at imagery, if you look at the imagery certain times of year, you can see oaks with their leaves on. You can kind of tell where some of those oaks are at.
That's pretty talented if you're picking that up, because I
was about to say, you might want to use, I would have to use the OnX feature because I couldn't.
The OnX feature, to me, where I've hunted and I've looked at it, I'm like, it's like this broad brush approach to like, yeah, there's oaks here. Well,
it's not dialed in.
The oaks I want are not all over that area. I'm not saying it's not accurate, but
it'll get you in the ballpark.
Yeah,
you'd have to do a lot of searching, a lot of ground truthing to find the oaks you want.
I like that term, ground truthing.
But I mean, like you need to look and scout before you ever come to the state. I think you need to look at those public areas and look at the aerial photos of them and see what kind of habitat they've got. Because if you're a Western hunter coming to Illinois and you want to hunt open country, there's a lot of places that have a lot of open country. A lot of public sites that don't get that pressured probably compared to a lot of the timbered sites.
Yeah, and those guys are probably a little bit better at the spot and stock than we are, because I know a lot of us are lazy.
And one, I mean, like you can spot and stalk, especially as you're getting into early November, you can start spot and stalking. You find a buck bedded with a doe out there, or other similar situations, some bucks fighting or whatever. You that provides a really good opportunity. One thing I've wanted to try is what some of the Western hunters have been doing, where they're actually decoying as they're bow hunting, like stalking up with a two-dimensional decoy.
Like what's his name? Brandon. I can't think of his last name. He's with Drury Outdoors now.
Oh,
from up in Salem.
Is it Fuqua?
He was with Caleb Lush, and they have a video of it. It's a Boone and Crockett.
It's out in the middle of a cornfield.
Yeah, it's insane though, that video.
Yeah,
it's crazy good.
But there's a guy that hunts Kansas, and he does it on a regular basis with that kind of decoy. They make them to actually fit on the front of your bow.
Yeah,
and I think he takes that decoy and actually puts a better stake on it. And I think sometimes he attaches it to his bow, sometimes he doesn't. But I mean, I listened to a podcast with him talking about it, and it's just a really intense style of hunting. You get deer right up in your face, and you get action.
Yeah.
And Mark Kenyon actually met up with that guy last year or the year before when he went and tried like several different types of hunting throughout the country. And he tried that. And I don't know if he ended up killing a deer doing it, but he had a lot of close calls, and it's, I want to try it. I just don't have the.
It's very popular out west, I will say. A lot of people use it for mule deer and antelope because there is no cover. So you almost have to you have to create cover in a way out there. But I think that would be a very like interesting way, especially if you're coming from out west and it's something like you've done before and you've kind of, maybe have utilized it before for antelope or mule deer or, whatever you're hunting. Like if you feel really comfortable doing that, like you said, there's definitely areas out here that, the wide open country, you would have an advantage over, everyone else who's not, able to hunt that way.
And it's just areas that aren't getting pressured. Even if you go to those public sites and you look at where people are hunting, they're not hunting the open areas. They're hunting the timbered areas primarily.
True. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
So I think that would be, a good place to start. If that's what you want to do. If you want to hunt timber, there's lots of places. If you're looking for swampland, I don't think there's as much unless you want to go to some of the far southern counties
down south.
And there's a lot of land down there that doesn't probably see near as much pressure per acre as what some of the land to the north does. But look at the area, see where the habitat is that you want to try to hunt, and try to find some of those out of the way spots that are either further from the truck or maybe not that far from the truck that people are going to walk past. I mean, if you've looked at studies where they look at where people hunt, most people aren't going like so many 100 yards off the road, past that point, people aren't going there. And if you go like between parking areas, people don't go like between the parking areas. They'll go straight in, or they'll go in, but the area is right adjacent to the parking areas. I mean, if you've ever heard of Dan Infault and the Hunting Beast, he's written some really good articles on hunting those types of areas. And he's sat inside of parking lots in sight, like the places where he's embarrassed to be seen.
Do you remember
killed deer, huge bucks?
I think
right there.
Was it last year me and you went down south and we experienced the same thing that he's talking about by the parking area. We went in, made a big 2-mile loop, didn't hardly see any deer, got back to the truck, and there's deer running everywhere right at the truck. And it's like, why did we just walk, that entire distance? So definitely, I think as whitetail hunters, you don't always have to go that far to find them. Like elk hunting, you get in there and get as far as you can get, but whitetail, it's not always the case. But another thing that I'd add to like an early season strategy, in particular this year, would be with water. I mean, we haven't really talked about water at all, and we've been in a drought. And it's like, if you're in an area that's, first off, I would focus on an area that has a lot of water. If you're hunting a huge, I don't know if there's, we got some acreage on here that's like 15,000 acres, like Mississippi River. I think that's one of those locations. I think you want to stay close to big water sources, which you got a
lot of water on the Mississippi River hunting areas.
A lot of water down there, but it's low. It's low, but not necessarily just the Mississippi, but you look at areas that are away from the river source, and I would, those deer have to water at some point or another. But then again, they drink in little puddles, and it's probably not as important as like an elk and a wallow would be. But
so
overlook it.
I would say step one is scouting on your computer. Now, it used to be like get a topo map. And a lot of the old USGS topo maps, they had the public land outlined on them. And that was a great way to start. It's so much easier now because you've got all the information that was on the topo maps, plus a whole lot more available electronically in so many different forms that you can look at it. And just on one app, you can swipe topo and satellite, leaf on, leaf off. And on the
what was that
Spartan Forge app? Now you can get lidar image.
Have you seen this, Jordan? The lidar imagery.
It's amazing.
If they have that, if we can look at that to go out west, I feel like you could find every wallow imaginable. It's incredible. It's like, I don't know what you would compare it to as far as what the map you were showing me was.
Yeah, mine on my phone wasn't as good as what.
Yeah, it's very detailed compared to other stuff that we're looking at.
But the lidar imagery, I mean, you're not seeing any of the trees, just the ground level imagery. And so you can see like old road beds, you can see all the topography, all the drains and creeks and little rises and stuff that just doesn't even show on a topo map. I mean, it doesn't go into that detail. Like a topo map, you got to go there and like look at it and see what's really there, because a lot of times there's stuff you're not seeing on the topo, but on that LiDAR, it shows everything. And like old ponds and any little rise in elevation, you can see it on there. And that, I mean, it cuts down so much on, you know, that first phase of the scouting, that looking at maps and looking online, studying those public areas and seeing what kind of habitat's there. And then the second step to me is, if you're going for a week, you've still got to do some ground truthing. You've got to go scout those areas. And there's a quote from that. It's not from Dan Infalt. Dan Infalt quoted Abraham Lincoln today on the web. And what he was saying is, you need to sharpen your axe. And he is saying, you know, he had gotten out of sharpening his axe because he had spent so much time helping other people learn how to sharpen their axe that he wasn't doing. And so what he was talking about is a quote from Abraham Lincoln that said, if somebody gives me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend 4 hours sharpening my axe and 2 hours cutting the tree down.
I like that.
And so what Dan's saying is that the sharpening your axe, that's the scouting, that's the groundwork, you know, that if you got a 6-day hunt, you need to be scouting for 4 days of that and hunting for 2, and then you would do better off.
Yeah, that's essentially what we do on our elk hunts, right? To find the elk, you have to spend 3 days putting in legwork.
Saying we're sharpening the axe it's a
roundabout way to get it.
It's a roundabout way of saying it. I think we're not doing justice to axe sharpeners by saying what we're doing for 4 days in the elk woods is sharpening. We're
sharpening it the hard way, probably, but
we are, okay. Yeah. So I think that's a great jump off point to kind of the like.
Hey, are we getting off of hunting tactics? Because I got a question over here.
Hit me with it.
So how do we feel about rattling, grunting on public ground? Because you're talking about highly pressured deer. Is there a time of the year that still works, or is that something that you try to stay away from, or do you move around? I mean, can you make multiple setups in a day? Rattling, is that another technique that you would employ, or are you just saying to hell with rattling? Everybody's doing it. Because I've personally sat in a stand before, got in a long ways, got in there about an hour before daylight, and sat there and listened to a guy rattle for at least 3.5, 4 hours all morning, and he never quit. For the first hour, I was like, oh my God, there's 2 170s down there fighting, calling my dad, this and that. But if, eventually I put it together. So are you using rattling and grunting and different techniques to call?
I've killed deer on public land doing that. I've killed deer with a decoy on public land.
So don't shy away from it necessarily.
Now, that's not to say that it's for every day on public land. Once the pressure picks up, I'm done with that. And that's why I'm saying like late October is probably better than hunt. Well, I don't know, better is the right word. I prefer to hunt late October rather than mid-November on public land, because you can still get away with some of that. But then again, it depends on the deer you're hunting and your history with that deer. And would
you try to rattle this deer?
I did.
Did you rattle him in, or you just tried it?
Well,
it sounds like he's got a good story here.
So I would say it was probably very beginning of November, and either that or late October. And I had a decoy out, and I was in timber. It wasn't like an open field. And a lot of people think with a decoy, you got to put it out in a crop field where they can see it from 300 yards away and everything. It's not how I'm usually using a decoy. You don't want it where it's like in the middle of a thicket where they're not going to see it until they're 5 yards from it. But it doesn't hurt if they don't see it until they're 40 yards from it, 50 yards from it. I honestly, every mature buck that I've seen come into one of my decoy setups has reacted the same way. Their hair stands up. They start walking stiff-legged and turning their head, and it's always been a positive reaction with the mature bucks that I've seen come into my decoys. Now the less mature bucks, usually they're a little iffy about coming into them, and a lot more nervous, and they'll try to like sniff them. They'll go nose to nose with them, but they're not really looking to fight them. but you get that aggressive reaction from the mature bucks. So, but that morning I'd set up the decoy, and it was in a funnel where I was like 10 yards off the trail the deer would have been coming on. And then the decoy was out in the edge of this open in front of me. If it came from the other way, really, because if it came from the side that the brush was on next to me, I was going to shoot him before he ever saw the decoy. But if he came from the other way, and it was a little more open hardwoods on the other side of me, that's what I had the decoy for, just to pull him into range. And really, he was probably would have came into range. But half of the reason I hunt with a decoy is because it's fun. I mean, if you've ever had a mature buck come into a decoy and see him posture, and I've never had him knock him over because I've never let him.
It's probably fun until you have to carry it in, though. Is that right?
Oh, it gets old.
Yeah.
And that's half the reason I quit hunting with them by early November, usually. But the other half is on public. It gets so pressured that the rattling, the grunting, the decoying, I give up on it once people start showing up. But that morning, set up the decoy there, was, I had a good feeling that buck was going to come through. And it was probably an hour after daylight. I rattled and I stopped, and like a minute later, I'm looking around and I'm watching pretty good. Didn't see anything coming. And you rattle, you need to be ready with your bow as soon as you get done. And you need to be watching when you rattle, because they'll come in.
They come in hot sometimes.
And you'll get busted because they're looking.
Yeah, they know exactly where it's coming from.
But, I waited like a minute, and I'm looking around and watching, and I grunt like 2, maybe 3 times. And then I hear something take off behind me, and I look, and it's a big buck. And I'm 90% positive it was him. Now, looking back, though, I don't know if he was coming to my rattling or if he was coming from. So what happened after that is about 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour later, I see a guy slipping in on the trail that comes in through the funnel, and he's kind of scouting his way in.
Public hunting.
And he ends up like going right by on the trail. It's like 10 yards from me. Never saw me. I just let him go, and he gets out there and sees the decoy, and then he starts looking around and looks up.
Takes a shot at it real quick.
Says, I swear the guy, I don't think it was him, but the guy looked just like Steve Bartilla, if you've ever seen him. And I still say it was him, but I know it wasn't, because somebody else told me they saw his license plate, and it was from
this
Florida.
Guy over here is Nico sliding underneath you.
That's my story, and I'm going to stick to it. But what I think happened is he parked pretty close to where the deer was bedded. The deer, got up and slowly started sneaking my way. And had I not rattled or grunted, I think the deer would have came right to me. The rattling, I don't think, was what did me in. I think, he was coming towards me. And then when I grunted, he spotted me.
Yeah.
And that was, and after that, I never rattled or grunted any other time that I hunted that deer.
Yeah.
And it made me think twice about it. I'm not saying it won't work on public land. I'll probably still do it at times, but I think you need to think about the deer that you're hunting. Now, this is coming from a local public land hunter point of view. I think if you're coming in November, it's probably the best time to rattle or call, decoy or anything. On public land, I don't know. I don't know if I'd do it.
Yeah, it could be hit or miss.
Now, this year, I saw a buck chasing a doe on this near a place that I hunt one evening after dark. It chased her across the road. And so the next morning I went back to the last place I saw them, and I went in and just past where I saw them, got in the woods up there and set up in the tree. And like just after I got set up in the tree, I wasn't even done hanging my stuff up, and I hear the 2 deer start fighting. I mean, and I've never really heard a fight, like a real, I've seen them spar and heard that, but this was like, they were all over the place, moving back and forth and knocking into brush. And I mean, they're a lot louder.
Yeah.
And when you're rattling and banging antlers, that's not even half of what's going on in a deer fight. If you've seen like the people in the hunting public rattle when they're on the ground, that's a lot more accurate. They're usually kicking brush and leaves and making it sound like a real fight.
Similar
so that would be something that I think would be a good idea. And you see them use it on public land all the time. But I think there would be an advantage to hunting on the ground and rattling.
Yeah, moving around a little bit.
And making it a little more realistic. And you got to pick your spot where you're doing that, because it's not going to work in open hardwoods or.
Yeah. Where are we transitioning to now, Jordan?
So we're getting to the money shot that everyone came for.
Money shot.
Where, like, we were talking about LiDAR, we were talking about like how to find a public spot. So if you're coming from out of state, like how would you go about finding a hunting like public land to hunt? Do you have any recommendations, areas, maybe to look towards? But how would you go about it? Would you, Onyx, this or that, what to look for, what part of the states? Are you looking for big properties, small properties? Are you looking for, things that might not pop out at you right away at a map? Because I think, a lot of the public that I think of, growing up in Southern Illinois, a lot of the public spots weren't exactly areas that are, that you first think about when you think about hunting public. You think about looking up, state wildlife areas. You think about looking up on the IDNR and finding, maybe areas that are, marketed to hunters or, come hunt here. But there's a lot of public ground that I think is underutilized, that a lot of people maybe not look at. Maybe, city lakes, I think, are a great example. State parks, areas that, we might not think about as, hunting properties that aren't exactly marketing as hunting, but you can hunt them publicly. So what are kind of some things you look for when trying to find your next public hunting spot? And I think, Hunter, we have like the IDNR list of,
Yeah, so I'm trying to look. You guys can keep talking about this, and I'll try to pull up what I would try to do personally, knowing what I know now is to come on here and look at this harvest report that I'm trying to pull up. And that would at least give you an idea of acreage and how many deer are actually harvested there per year. So that's somewhere to start with. And that, I think all that data comes from the windshield cards. You think that's right? The windshield cards that you have to print out when you hunt public, and you're supposed to turn those in every year at the end of the season. And
well, actually, when you check your deer in online, if you hunt public, it asks you which public site you hunted. So
Yeah.
it actually, I believe this data actually comes directly from the check-in data.
Okay.
Yeah. And what data are you talking about there, Hunter? What site did you pull that from?
This is from, I believe it's IDNR's website, and you can just Google search public hunting areas report, or I have some other. I'm having trouble.
We could put the link up on the podcast, kind of in the descriptions. I think, if I was looking to hunt public, kind of what I know now is a lot of the areas, like you said, that maybe, are not marked. Some areas are really poorly marked. The spot I'm thinking of now that I've hunted publicly for deer is no longer a public spot. It was a public hunting area that got purchased by a private kind of bidder, just south of Marion. Was right across the interstate from, it was right across the interstate from the National Refuge where you cannot hunt. And deer hunting in there, it was mainly a goose and duck hunting spot. And they're
talking about by the lake.
I'm talking about the lake. Yeah, the city lake.
Parked out by the lake.
Parked out by the lake.
So I will say that
8 miles from Santa Fe.
But that city lake, it was right across the interstate from a national refuge where, me and Hunter have filmed a lot of really large Boone and Crockett deer. And thinking about how deer travel, I know there's been, deer taken off that lake. There's also, a lot of areas in the southern part of Illinois, like national forest, where.
Hey, can you pull that footage up of those big Boone and Crockett deer? Because I don't particularly remember that whole thing you're talking about right now.
our Instagram that's full of videos of deer that we film?
Yeah, I've seen about 8 booners down there. I lost the property though.
But yeah, what are some of the things you look for when you're looking for public land spots?
Well, traditionally, I'm not gonna lie to you here. I hunt the same spots that my dad has showed me my whole life, so I don't think I'm the best to go on and speak about how to scout online and all that stuff. So
I guess
I
what
mean, I wanted to
qualities, like what do those spots like quality wise have compared to the other
one
spots?
particular area has a ton of food, and I mean that's generally the best part about that spot. And then there's another spot that's very thick. It has absolutely almost zero food. So like you can pretty much phase it out at times of the year.
Do you
But
think do you think they're easy to find? Like if you're an out-of-state hunter, and you're searching like, places to hunt, like yeah, like if you go on the IDNR site, they will literally give you a list. Like there's
yeah,
the
that's
list you have,
that's what I'm trying to pull up.
but there's also like they will promote certain areas. Like they will promote, hey, you can hunt on this spot, you can hunt on this spot. Do you think the spots that you're hunting, are necessarily promoted, or do you think they're more of like hidden gems that are harder to find? If you don't know what you're looking for.
I wouldn't say that they're hidden gems, but they're also not, you're not going to look at it on a map. One spot you're going to look at on a map and go, okay, this has got everything I need. The other spot you're going to look at it and go, there's absolutely zero food here. And yeah, that's what I would say about those spots. I have found these reports though.
I think one thing that in general, if you're coming from a different area and you're looking at public areas, is you can look at distance from urban areas, because the places that are close to urban areas are going to have a lot more pressure, and it makes a huge difference. So like, I lived in Yorkville, Illinois for a few years, and man, the places were hard to hunt there. There were people driving from Chicago, driving like 2 hours to hunt a lot of these public areas, and like there were places where you had to sign in and hunt, and only 2 hunters could hunt at a time, and there were 2 hunters every day of the season. Every morning and every afternoon there were 2 hunters. Like you had to get there an hour and a half before daylight even to get in and hunt the place. And it wasn't a big place, so that it just can't handle that kind of pressure. Now there were bigger areas that were not as, not any further from the city, that you could actually hunt pretty well. And like, but the problem for me was they were a long drive from where I live, so I didn't get to hunt them as much. But the only opportunity I had was like the last week of archery season at this one pretty open public area. And I had this big group of deer come across this open field to me. It was like all those except for the last deer was a big mature buck. I mean, huge body on him. He'd already shed both sides. He came up and stopped 25 yards and just stood there. And I was at full draw. I'm like, oh, and I just let down and let him go. But
yeah, so I don't know. I don't know that I'm the best to talk about.
So if you look at the state, I mean, like
map
where we're at, there's some urban areas, but they're not big like St. Louis or Chicago. So you can,
and when you say where we're at, because like most people don't know, where we're located.
So the Route 13 corridor in Southern Illinois. So if you look at the, you got Carbondale, Marion, Harrisburg, and you go up north and south of there, 50 minutes either way. There's some public land scattered out, but like even at that, like if you want to find less pressure, if that's what you're looking for, you can keep on going south. You can go down to like Pope, Alexander. You can get down there and you got like the
cache.
The cache. It's a big area.
So what I'll say,
and you're gonna have less pressure. You're gonna have maybe not as many deer as some of the, but you have a lot better chance of finding
there's still
a
potential
bigger deer probably,
because
there's a lot of swamps down there and places that are a little bit harder to hunt and don't have as much pressure.
Yeah.
So I know, like the property I was talking about earlier, like our permission spot, me and my dad hunt, it's in Pope County. And it is surrounded by, well, it's the Shawnee National Forest, which is a huge, expanding forest that stretches from essentially the Mississippi to the Ohio River. And like you said, they're during archery seasons, at least next to the property where we're at, there's never any trucks along the road, and this road goes for miles into our, spot, and we're surrounded. It's 165 acres, and on 3 of the 4 sides, it is surrounded by the Shawnee National Forest. So the deer are constantly moving on and off the national forest. And there are a lot of really big, trophy class deer that are on that property that we hunt. And a lot of those deer are moving on and off public. And there's just, other than, like I said before, there's a couple people who come in from Florida. We know them pretty personally now because they're there every single year and we're used to seeing them. But other than those 2, it's a man and his wife. Other than those 2, we oftentimes will, since the property lines are property lines with public, it's essentially we can hunt any of it, and we will oftentimes hunt the public because we find that going on to public is sometimes better than hunting even the private parcels we have. And then looking at the list here, I was on Onyx earlier looking at spots. Hunter has.
I basically took the harvest report from 2022, 23. And this data would be better if you pulled from the last 5 years. But the way I had to do all of this was enter it in line by line on Excel because the state didn't allow me to download the right file. But
it's still great data. And the fact that you have, you've compiled it for everybody watching. Not that a lot of people watch, but yeah. A lot of these spots that you have pulled up, would stick out on you with a map. I know the Jim Edgar Panther Creek area, it's kind of up towards the family farm that I hunt. And what I'll say is when you're up in that part of Illinois, it truly is it really doesn't matter where you are. You always have a chance to kill a big deer. The Cache River that's located on there. I've never deer hunted the Cache, but I've duck hunted it extensively when I was in high school and college. That's what we did every weekend, was when we hunted the Cache River. And that's, that's during duck season. So that's in December, that's in January. But
me and Nico actually, we went down to it last year and spent, I think, a day or 2, but it wasn't, it was late season. So we kind of missed it good, but it's another good area that you could go to and find.
I never saw a deer hunter. I've duck hunted it. I bet I've duck hunted it 50 to 100 times. And we would walk in, we would walk miles to get to these, swamplands, to duck hunt. I saw a lot of deer. That was, one of the spots I was talking about when I said, I've duck hunted and seen a lot of deer while duck hunting. That's an area where, you can walk in and hunt it. And then what you'll find, I think in Southern Illinois a lot, because a lot of the duck hunting spots that were public for deer or duck, if you have a boat, you can get to even more areas. The Kaskaskia River, when you look at that piece, it's just a long strip along the Kaskaskia River, but it's surrounded on all sides by, cropland and private land where we know that those deer like to travel up and down those river corridors where, you never know. A big deer could very easily come off those cornfields, and be in those areas. So
there's probably a lot of access to along the Mississippi. As far as you look at that top 10 huntable acres, you got 18,565, and that some of that stuff's going to be better accessed by boat. You're going to be able to get a little bit further back in there.
And I think that's kind of if you're coming to hunt public land, being creative and saying, hey, if you have a boat, we used to duck hunt the Mississippi and the Ohio, and a lot of those areas, it's a lot of work to get to them. It was a lot of work to get to them during duck season. But, if you have a boat, if you have that resource, that puts you, maybe a step ahead of people who don't, and you're able to get to some of those spots that are essentially landlocked by private, because a lot of those spots are completely surrounded by private, and the only way to access them is by the water.
Yeah.
And then the one below, like Kaskaskia, I used to live on the Carlisle Lake, and there is there's a hunting area right there north of the lake. I lived right off of it. There are a ton of deer in there. Now, I never saw any, trophy class deer. You see a lot of big deer on the private within a mile or two of the hunting, which, do those deer, eventually travel onto the public? Probably. Do they do it often? Like, hard to say, but I know the Carlisle Lake area, like if you're just wanting to shoot a deer, like, man, there's a lot of deer up there. I used to drive through there to photograph turkeys and deer because I lived there. And I mean, there was a ton of deer right on the public areas. So I think a lot of these spots are, really good places to start. It's hard to, if you only have a week, come in and expect to kill maybe a big deer, but, you come the first time and, maybe you kind of get your footing, and then you come the second time and maybe you hone in on an area. And before you know it, you might have, a great hunting spot that you can come back to every year that, nobody else, hunts.
Yeah. I think if you're looking at, like, you're just coming down here to get your best opportunity, you can kind of look at that second chart, and that's going to be a decent indicator as far as the density goes in that area. That's all that I did there, is just kind of break it up at the end column, amount of deer harvested per acre. And you can see a lot of those places are pretty small. And I know that has something to do with it, but down there, like the number 7 ranking is a Hamilton County area of 1,530 acres. So I know that would be a good area to be in. You got like 10 Mile State Park there too. It's a pretty good area. It's out there, like we talked about the urban, non-urban stuff earlier. That's out there in the boonies, pretty rural area. So yeah, I mean that would be a decent starting spot. At least you can look at these 2 charts, and by no means is that an indicator that you're going to go in and kill a big buck. I mean, we don't really have the statistics on the antler size and stuff on those, so
we don't think it does happen every year. I mean, every year you see a big deer killed on public around us. I mean, there's
100%. You know somebody every year that kills a big one.
I mean, just like I said, there's some of the areas, like you pointed out, are, smaller tracks. Maybe if you're coming from out of state, you don't want to kind of pigeonhole yourself. Some of the areas like the Mississippi area, the Mississippi River, the Cass River is a big area. The Shawnee Forest is a big area. Like if you kind of, you want a lot of land to cover, for your first time, like there's a lot of good, I think.
I mean, personally though, you also can, you look at this down here at the bottom, and one of these pieces is 40 acres. I mean, that's, if you're really intimidated by trying to get out there and scout a huge chunk of land, because that can be hard too, just to pick a spot on a huge 18,000 acre piece. You look at a 120, 150 acre property, or even some of the ones that are in the 500s, and that kind of at least eliminates a lot of searching. So that would be another idea too, if you're somebody that doesn't want to dive out there and try to scout the whole world for 3 days.
Yeah.
Do you have something to say?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think so you probably can't find these numbers for individual public spots, but I believe that you can look up Boone and Crockett, maybe Pope and Young record book.
Yeah. The
buck numbers by county in most states. I haven't done it myself because I don't travel to hunt whitetails myself. Not something I'm opposed to. I just, with
there's no reason
a family with kids, it's kind of hard. Yeah. But, a lot of people, when they're looking for places to go, they'll look up by county the Boone and Crockett kills or the Pope and Young kills.
That's a great idea.
And that doesn't mean there are, that the public land there is going to have them, but it's a good start, and you'll start to see patterns.
And I think there's a little bit of a pattern to that for sure. The genetics you talk about, like,
I think you're going to see genetics. You're going to see like type of country, like farm country versus others, and you're going to see like distance from urban areas.
Yeah.
And some of that may be not what you think. I mean, there may be more big bucks killed near urban areas, but you got to think there's a whole lot more hunters out there.
Yeah.
Too. So you got to take that into account when you're looking at that stuff.
I think of river bottom ground too, as far as genetics, like good soil, it's going to produce big deer, year after year. One spot in particular that we've hunted a lot growing up, somewhere along that river, you're going to jump one every year it'll blow your boots off. You're like, holy crap, I didn't even know they made them that big out here. So, yeah, river bottoms can be a good place to search too if you're in search of, one of those true giant public land bucks.
There was a lot of
one way to find a place that is kind of out of the way, overlooked. Like you talk about the water access. You don't think about it often, but if you've got a creek that goes along a road and it's deeper than what your rubber boots are, people aren't going to hunt the other side of it. If you bring some hip boots or some chest waders and get across it, or a kayak. Or I've heard of people even bringing like the fishing inner tubes like you'd use for fly fishing,
get
paddling across, like just whatever you can to get across that, and you're going to eliminate a lot of pressure, and you're going to find a lot more deer.
You're not going to try to find that log in the dark and make the cross.
No, I've done it.
I think we all have done that.
I've done a lot too.
Yeah,
I think that's a great point. Just like barriers that are not barriers to whitetail, but are maybe barriers to people. Like we said, going in on a boat where people don't have boats, or like what you said, just even if it's just a creek that most people are going to come to and say, yeah, I'm not going to cross that. I think that's a great kind of like tip for a lot of people.
Or places that don't have a parking lot. It's public, but you don't have a parking lot for a long stretch. If you've got buddies with you, get dropped off.
Yeah.
I mean, like I mentioned, a lot of times I'm getting dropped off.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people coming from other states doing that too, because usually they're coming in a group.
Yeah.
And they'll go around and they'll drop people off going in for the evening hunt. But that, getting away from those parking areas, a lot of your locals aren't doing that. They're parking at the parking areas and walking in.
I think that's a great, like getting creative with the access, right? Like finding a different way to tackle a property that maybe normal people wouldn't. And I think, I know like when we were duck hunting the cache, everyone, like you said, there were certain pull-offs and parking spots. And so the duck holes that people would hunt were always the ones adjacent to a pull-off, right? And we kind of found that, we were young and, had nothing better to do, where we would park at one of those pull-offs. And when we would walk down the road a mile or two, with our waders and all of our gear, just to cut in at a point that didn't have, a parking area, or didn't have even just like a little area you could pull off the road. And what we found was, we would get to a hole and there wouldn't be another headlamp, on it. And we were successful duck hunting in that way. And I think deer hunting, like you could use the same strategies, like you said, to access areas that other people aren't accessing, because Hunter said it at the very beginning, but like, there are like, we all think that we're going above and beyond, but you can always go one step further. And there are definitely lazy hunters who are just going to say, hey, I'm going to park at the parking lot and walk in, because that's just kind of like, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah. Yep.
And another thing, as far as access, there's a lot of places in Illinois, and you have to look at the site information, but there's a lot of places that have roads throughout the hunting area that aren't open to vehicles, but are open to bicycles or deer carts, to think about how you're going to get the deer out. And, look at that. And a lot of the places do allow e-bikes now. So check with your local site to make sure. I know at least one federal place and a couple state places that I know allow e-bikes now. And you see a lot of people using them though too, but you'll go and the parking lots will be really crowded, but they're big areas and people are going all different directions. So I mean, it's worth looking into, at least getting out there and scouting and seeing if there's some overlooked places. And that's another thing that you might, if you're coming from a western state, I'm not sure about the laws for packing deer out, but I think public land in Illinois, you want to check in that before you plan on doing that, because I'm not sure it's legal on most public land in Illinois as far as quartering a deer and packing it out.
Okay. Yeah. They have regulations too in place as far as transporting it across state lines and
Mm-hmm.
things along that nature
Yeah.
that
If
you
you
need to
kill
look
one,
into.
you need to debone it. You need to, if you're going to take the skull, you need to clean the skull, sterilize it before you bring it out of state.
Yeah,
So either skull cap it, clean it out. If you're gonna Euro mount it, you need to do that before you take it out of state. You need to
make sure you read all the rules and regulations on IDNR's hunting brochure. It will spell it out for you. But that is something logistically that you need to think about and have a way to do it before you get out of it.
I think the deer cart's a great suggestion. Again, when we duck hunted those river bottoms where we would walk in miles, people would laugh at us, but we would take a deer cart in duck hunting because we'd put our decoys on there. We'd put, our waders. Everyone else was carrying stuff, and that limited their capacity to how far they could go. Where we would take a deer cart and we would load it up with our guns, our decoys, everything we needed. Where all you had to do was drag that behind you. And I think it's a great point where, if you're going to go in there a long ways, and, there's a lot of saddle hunters now, there's a lot of people who still use climbers. I will never be one of those people. So like if you're taking in a tree stand, or you're going to hunt all day. So, maybe you're taking a chair, you're taking food, like whatever you're taking in, hauling it in on a deer cart gives you not only the ability to get things in, but more importantly, to get something out. Because we experienced at elk hunting, if you leave your gear at the camp or you leave your gear at the truck, you got to walk all the way back to it before.
Yeah, if you leave your stuff at camp. I've seen some pretty sweet setups on public land, and we had a guy one time with a bicycle that had like a trailer attached to the back end of the bicycle, to where he had his stand. I think he had a hang on, or he had some kind of stand, a climber probably on the back, and it could also transition into hauling a deer out. So yeah. I can't imagine the leg workout on that though, trying to pedal one out of there, but
it's very common now. I mean, especially with e-bikes, it's very common. Most people have a trailer or a cart that they pull behind it. Yeah.
I'd say that was like 8-10 years ago. So that guy was he's groundbreaking.
I mean, that's the way to go on big public tracks these days, if you've got a place that's got a lot of roads and interior roads that are closed to vehicles.
I also did I saw a picture on Facebook the other day where a guy had taken like a ladder stand and put wheels up on the top.
I saw that.
Did you see that? That was great.
Yeah, where he basically turned his.
But I've seen multiple out-of-state hunters come to Illinois and hunt the public that have that same kind of setup. They modified ladder stand and put wheels on it, and they use it.
Yeah, because you're supposed
to pull the stand in and to haul deer out too.
I mean, most of the regulations at those specific sites, you're supposed to take the stand out that day, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're not even supposed to leave them, or you're not supposed to have anything that pierces the bark, anything like that. I mean, I've seen stands get confiscated out there too. You'll see a note on a tree. It's like, this stand has been taken by, this site. So
the DNR takes them, and then you can buy them real cheap. They do auctions.
Yeah, that's a good tidbit there too.
And it's highly variable. So another thing, check your site regulations.
Yeah.
I mean, after you find a site and you do your scouting, you need to go through the rule book for that site, or for DNR sites, they'll have a fact sheet usually, and they'll have a map on that fact sheet that outlines where you can hunt and where you can't. Because, I mean, OnX may show the outline of the place, but sometimes there are places where you can hunt and can't hunt.
Yeah. So while you guys are talking
on those properties,
I'm going to try to get on here and see if I can't find one of those fact sheets, because those are really important pieces of information. If you find a site that you want to hunt, you need to get on here and check out that fact sheet before. But I'm going to try to pull one up while you guys are continuing here, just so you can kind of see where it's at.
And I know for sure that there are sites that will let you leave. I think it's like 1 or 2 stands out. And you got to have your name and maybe your phone number or something on them. But there's a lot of sites that won't let you leave a stand out overnight at all. State and federal sites in Illinois. I don't know how the Shawnee does it. You know?
I'm not sure.
I don't know the regulations, but I can tell you, as someone who's walked that turkey hunting, walked the deer hunting, there are stands on it. Now, I'm not saying that they're legally left there, but there are definitely there's definitely tree stands. We put stands right on the property where we're hunting private. We're on the private portion, but we leave our stands up, and there's times when you look across and, you'll see a stand there, and, we'll see it all year. It'll be there the next year. And then, you'll see somebody hunting it, firearm season or whatnot. And, whether that's who left the stand there or somebody just found that stand, there's definitely tree stands left up on a lot of the public pieces. You always see if you're,
those are not bad spots to sit though, too. If you're scouting and you come across something good, you might just,
the best thing to find, I think, is just like an old wooden tree stand. Looks like it's been there for years. The property, it's private, but the farm that I'm hunting now, the family farm now, nobody's hunted it since, well, my fiance's grandpa hunted it, and that would have been years and years ago. Nobody's hunted it since. And I scouted it, and I was, trying to figure out where to put my stand and trying to figure out. And finally, I got to an area where these big bucks were hanging out. The family said, "Hey, we've been seeing them coming out of this pocket. Like, we've been seeing them here." I put the camera there, found the big deer in that area. I got my camera set up, and actually during firearm deer season, this last weekend, I spotted, now that all the leaves have fallen out of the trees, I looked up and there was an old wooden tree stand about 25 yards from where I had put my stand. And I bet almost every deer I saw that day walked directly under it. And having my trail camera up now for a week, like, that is one of probably the hottest spot on the farm. And Grandpa knew about it years and years ago. Grandpa knows. You find an old wooden stand built up in the tree, you should put your stand right next to it.
So I've got dnr.illinois.gov pulled up here, typed in hunting fact sheets. Can you see this? I assume you can
see it.
Okay. This is where you're going to want to go if you do find a particular area of interest. You can click in South region where we're at, and then they're going to have all the areas listed out here. I'll try to click on one. What have we been talking about? Cache?
Is that cache? Yeah, it's at the top in the C's.
Was it up there? There it is. Okay, so click on that, and hopefully this works for us here. Probably not. There's site characteristics. Click on printable or digital, you think? Digital for now, printable for later.
And you'll see on there, there's a district wildlife biologist and a phone number.
Call him.
You hear about it all the time, like when you're, Western hunting, they say, call the local biologist, but works the same way back east. Those biologists know the areas. And I think when you're talking to biologists on the phone, what I noticed out west, if you just call and say, "Hey, where should I hunt?" you don't get a lot of information. But if you have specific areas, and kind of have done your homework, and you say, "Hey, I'm wanting to hunt this area and access it from this point," they're way more likely to say, "Hey, I would actually maybe try down the road a little farther," or, there's actually a pull off before that maybe not be marked. Maybe try that one instead. So if you're going to call a biologist, if you're going to, go the phone route, I would make sure that you kind of have done your homework on it a little bit, because nobody's just going to answer the phone and tell you exactly where to go.
Biologist, what's the biggest buck you've seen on this property?
Yeah, exactly. So go into it, having some areas you want to try out, maybe some options, and usually you can get further with that. So.
Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna pull up. We'll give it a couple seconds here before we get off and wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I mean, even if it doesn't, I think that's just a good.
Yeah, at least you know where
to go. You know where to go. Make sure you check the regulations for your hunt everywhere, because, like they said, some spots it's really hard to find information. Don't expect there to be like a sign. I know this Cache River area, like, there's a lot of pull-offs that you can pull off where there's not going to be a sign that tells you all the regulations.
Should be able to see it now. Is it sharing? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is what your map's going to look like for most areas, and that's basically all you need to know. You can confirm the boundaries that are on.
Yeah, you're restricted. You're no hunting, and you can compare it with your Onyx or whatever you're using, your roads, your parking. And then, check your regs.
Yeah. So I think
right.
that's going to wrap it up. Do you have a question?
I got a wrap-up question. I plan on having one every week.
Good. I wasn't prepared for one.
That's all right. I'll have one. You're hunting all day. You're going in an hour before daylight. You're hunting till dark. What are you bringing in your bag to eat for that all day sit? What's your one thing? Like if you could, that's your one meal that you're taking up with you.
Well, for starters, I'm 100%. I'm going to have a thermos full of coffee, straight black.
Does that not make you have to pee? Like you don't have to get down at 9 a.m. and
I do not get down from the stand to pee. It's a waste of time. I let it fly.
You pee off the edge of the stand.
100% all day long. I'm not getting down. I'm not bottling that up. It's worthless. It doesn't matter. Like, unless there's one standing underneath you and you're peeing on the thing's head, like, get over it.
It's mostly water.
Number 2 is a different story. That gets held for a later date, if you know what I'm saying.
You don't want to airdrop it.
No,
I don't think I'd sky dump unless there's a severe emergency.
Is that a saddle term? Sky dump?
That's a saddle term.
Okay.
All right. So you got coffee. What are you eating?
Breakfast. I probably have like Belvita snacks for a mid-morning snack because I've already had something on the way there before. I'm not saving it because I'm probably got a long hike in if it's public. Mid-morning Belvita, and then probably a PB&J for lunch, and maybe some trail mix. We've got these like coffee. What are they? Coffee beans, chocolate covered coffee beans from Trader Joe's.
Oh yeah, the coffee. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm putting those in there for about 2 o'clock.
Dark chocolate.
Yeah, that's my snack, and then I don't have dinner. Obviously, that's up to when I get out. But
I'm scared to ask Nico because he probably takes like a George Foreman up there with him. Like after elk hunting with him, Nico had 70-pound pack and 60 pounds of it was food.
It was worth it.
It was. We ate some of that for you. Actually, it was.
I had
fantastic.
bacon every day. It was amazing.
So, what are you taking up into the deer stand?
Well, the last couple of times I went, I haven't even took anything. Just roughed it out.
All right.
But
all day sit?
Yeah, I take an Nalgene full of water, and then if I take something, it's gonna be like some kind of bar or something. But that's about it.
My gosh.
That's
he's the extreme. He's like the complete opposite end of the spectrum for a whitetail hunt. That's when you're supposed to be lazy.
Yeah.
And like have all this food and just sit there and destroy it.
Tag the Lindsay Way on Instagram.
I only did one all-day hunt this season. It was actually, I believe, last week, and I ended up having an 8-pointer bedded with a doe running these other bucks off. And a few days before that, I had him come by with bow, and I wanted to get a shot at him, but for some reason that day, I ended up passing him multiple times during firearm season. But I think part of it, my kids already killed 3 bucks and a doe this year, so there's not a lot of room left.
What you're saying is you're eating deer in the stand, essentially.
Yeah. So, but that day, I brought a meal replacement bar, or like some cereal meal replacement bar, and I saved that for I waited till lunch. I waited till 11:30 to eat that. That was you gotta space it out. You gotta have something to look forward to.
That's true.
And then I brought a Snickers, and that was like the big thing, a king size Snicker that split into two parts there. And I saved that for mid-afternoon. And then from there it's,
so you're a Snickers and a meal replacement bar.
Yeah.
Are you coffee?
No, just water.
Why no coffee? Why is that not a thing?
I'm not against it. I don't know. It's too much stuff.
I will say packing that thing in and like hearing it cling off my release 18 times when I'm trying to get my camera arm, it's a little frustrating, but nothing better than freezing your butt off and then seeing the steam rise out of that thermos just burning your lips off.
I like it. I just haven't done it.
Well,
I've done it turkey hunting before.
You need to do it.
But and a pro tip, if you bring a water bottle, you bring one of those like something like a Nalgene where it's not gonna like crackle when those like the disposable water bottle, recyclable water bottles. But then like I didn't do it. But if you're bringing something like a Snickers in, if you can get like they have like the reusable, like they're not Ziploc, but like reusable bags that zip shut that are like like a thicker plastic,
You're
and they don't
trying to
make
eliminate
noise. So you can
noise,
put the transfer, some trail mix or something into one of those instead of the package that it comes in.
I just let it fly. What about you?
I'll tell you the loudest noise in the woods, and that's a Pop-Tart wrapper. That is one of my favorites.
What
I
flavor?
like early in the morning. Like I only sit all day during usually firearm deer season. I love a Pop-Tart, blueberry, or the fudge ones. I love
fudge sundae.
Oh yeah, those are the best. This last season, I had a whole pack of those little chocolate donuts, that come up in the thing you got to roll up, like the package. Yeah, those were real good. I mean,
they want to sponsor the podcast, by the way. That
the Hostess, like the little, I forget what they're called, but like the little donuts or whatever. That's a favorite. And what I also did, the one day I had a Jimmy John's number 12. That was my treat. If you've ever had the Beach Club. But one trick that I saw, I think I saw like Michael Huntsucker, like Heartland Bow Hunter, and like the Yeti thermoses. I don't drink coffee, but he would get a breakfast burrito and he would put it in that and then close it. And then midday, when you pull out your breakfast burrito, it's still hot. So
I tried.
What did he
do again? Sorry. What did he?
So I have a narrow, it's not the big, like 20 ounce. I have a narrow, like 16 ounce Yeti with the screw top. And I put 2 McDonald's sausage burritos in there. And like 3 hours later, I pulled them out. They were still hot.
Yeah, I tried to wrap a burrito in some aluminum foil, and about an hour and a half later, I'd warmed it up in the microwave that morning, about 2 minutes, nuked it, wrapped it in aluminum foil, got to the stand, gave one to my dad. I had one. The thing was colder than ice. I'm like, what in the world did I do? That's a great idea.
Pop them in, and I have the screw top. It seals. You put that thing in there. You pull it out hours later. It's still piping hot. So,
I know a guy who worked with some people that moved here from Mexico, and so they would do that. They would bring like one of those Yeti bottles, and they would have tamales in it, and they would pull them out at lunch, and they'd still be hot.
Yeah.
The main thing that I forgot to tell everybody that I drink and I love in the stand, and all you guys should too. Do you know what that is? I got to make this bigger on the screen. Come on. Oh, there it is. Sasquatch Tea Company. This is our first podcast sponsor. Sasquatch Tea. Tea for the bold. Tea for America. I drink that all day long. So I think that's a great way to end this stream, right?
That is. Play the outro music.
You can go buy some tea. How about that? We got a promo code, right?
We do have a promo code.
RC10. You get 10% off, so you can drink some tea in the stand.
And the tea is a lot more natural scent to it than coffee.
It does.
So it's almost cover scent.
It probably attracts.
I have different flavors.